Okay, today we're going to start chapter 14, all about Islamic civilization. So, chapter 14, lesson 1, we're first going to talk about the little background and then about the religion of Islam. So, first of all, we always start with the where, right? The geography. So, if you look at the map, we're going to talk about the Arabian Peninsula, it's also called Arabia. It is the area between the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. You should be pretty familiar with this area by now. And as usual, we're going to talk about why and what it's like there and how that affects their life, right? So it's going to be quite dry and it has a lot of desert. It can be very hot. Think like summer above 120. Water is not going to be very prevalent, right? Scattered springs or watering holes. I'm sure you've heard the word oasis before, right? It's that few areas that does have like an underground spring that will provide, some kind of life and growth, but it's far apart, right? But not all of Arabia is desert. If you look in the southwestern region, there are some mountains and valleys there, and enough rain falls that they can grow some like olive trees and things. In ancient times, you'll remember that this area, they have a lot of neighbors, right? You have Egypt to the west, Mesopotamia and Persians were in the north and east, and even more farther north, we talked about the Israelites, right? Greeks, Romans. So there are a lot of different neighbors. However, they're pretty far distances from Arabia, and the really severe climate usually kept them a little bit isolated, right? Not many are going to try to invade this land. Although it's not complete isolation because we know that trade has become quite big and they can still get there, right? Obviously, they're surrounded by water. Okay, so since it is that desert-like lifestyle, let's start way back, right? They were nomads like everyone else at first, right? They are going to travel from oasis to oasis to be able to live. They herded animals, usually camels, goats, and sheep. And then they would eat dried dates, things that they would be able to get, and then drink milk from the animals, right? A lot, not as much water. And they only rarely ate the meat from the goats and the sheep, special occasions, okay? It's very hot, as we talked about, right? And they have separate tribes, and they would look to their sheikh as their leader, and the different tribes would compete sometimes, right, for resources like the animals or land and water, right? So they do eventually settle down into towns like all the other civilizations we've talked about. Okay, and so then we get villages and they start trading, right? Merchants are going to develop carrying and usually that by camel across the desert to the different markets. And they would band together and travel together for safety. That's what the term caravan is about, the animals and the merchants traveling together in a line, and then trade's going to grow along those, trade routes. And so Mecca is going to be one of the major important cities. I notice I wrote it twice there. Mecca is more like the English version. I did it for both so you could see that you'll see it written both ways. And so it is a crossroads of trade. So it's going to become a quite big and important city. The caravans would cross there. And, they're on their way to the bigger markets like in Mesopotamia and Syria and even all the way to like China. So this also becomes quite an important religious site. And you can see here in the picture that black building there is called the Kaaba. And it is in the old original days, it would be surrounded by statues of the different gods and goddesses. And just like most places, right, the Arabians originally believed in many gods, so they were polytheistic, okay? And but they always the word for God, the main one was Allah, and they thought he was the creator, right? And there is a stone embedded in this corner of this building, and they believe that this stone actually came from heaven. There's different, stories about that exactly, but it's very holy to them, and so it's embedded that people can go and touch or even try to kiss the stone like Muhammad did. So we'll talk about him in a second. So this is a very famous building, the Kaaba, in the center of Mecca. Okay. And it's a holy site we'll talk about a little bit more. People go around it 7 times. In this picture, you can't tell but some of the pictures you can see like the swirl of them going around and around. Okay, so let's talk about the religion. So it started with a man named Muhammad. And he was from a merchant family. He was, I have a video to show you. He was young when he was orphaned, and he becomes this caravan leader and merchant, okay? And even though he did pretty well, he was very troubled by the greed he saw and all the wealthy citizens like looking out for themselves and then, neglecting the poor, and he really did not like that. He spent time outside in a cave praying alone, and it is said that it was then that he had a vision. I had a voice calling out to him and telling him to preach Islam. So Islam means surrender to the will of Allah, okay, or that's their word for God, right? And again, they'll tell you more in the video about the story. But here, the basis is that, he tells everyone you should worship only this one true God, right? Not all the other gods they have to destroy all their statues of the false gods, and they should share with the poor monetarily, and you should do good deeds. That's what God wants you to do, like be a good person and prepare for Judgment Day someday, okay? And so basically that's the message. And he starts going out and preaching, and it grows slowly. At first it's his family members and friends, and then he starts getting more people to listen. And of course, he would seem like a threat to the people in power, which are those wealthy merchants, right? So all the poor, of course, are going to flock to him, liking his message. And so it's very similar, isn't it, to some of the other stories we've heard. And so the religious leaders of the many gods, right, and the wealthy merchants, they are all, seeing him as a threat. His followers end up starting to feel threatened in Mecca, and so they actually moved to Yathrib. And let's see, I'll move that on. So this leaving to go to Yathrib is known as the Hijra, okay? And so that's the breaking off of, we're going to start over in this new place, right? Because Mecca was not tolerant of us, right? And so they start over, and the people there accept him, and they even rename the city of the Prophet, right? Naming after Muhammad, and it's renamed Medina. Okay, so you'll see sometimes both names depending on which, date of the map. All right, so to make a long story short, Muhammad is a really smart guy, very skilled politically and as a good religious leader. And so he is able to get a lot of loyalty, the people, and he raises an army, and their idea is to make an Islamic state, right? Get all the other tribes and all the people to follow him in his religion and have one holy city. He eventually starts conquering and does reclaim Mecca and makes it the holy city of Islam. And continues on, and during his lifetime, he gets basically the whole Arabian Peninsula as part of his Islamic state. Now, he dies in AD 632. Okay, so we'll talk about next time what happens after him. So what I want to do now is talk about the actual religion. Okay. Now, your book did not go into enough detail for my liking, so I have put extra details here that you are required to know. So, first of all, you'll notice that Islam shares some of the same beliefs as Judaism and Christianity. Okay, they're monotheistic. Their God is the same God. They have a different name, right? But there's the one true God. They all believe that. And this God is telling them what's right, wrong, and that there's ways you should act, right? So all those things are true for all of them. They even believe in a lot of the same prophets, right? Muslims believe in prophets, Adam and Abraham and Moses and all those. Muslims believe in all of those and think that they were all, prophets from God. The difference is Muslims believe that there was Adam and Abraham and Moses and Jesus and then Muhammad. Now, of course, Christians go up that same list, but then they stop with Jesus, right? They don't believe in Muhammad. And so that's one difference, is who's exactly, they add on an extra prophet, right? Okay, the other thing is they thought that he continued to receive messages, Muhammad this is, from Allah for more than 20 years. And so that is all written down eventually after he dies. He didn't write it himself, but his followers record, what he says. And that eventually becomes the Quran. The Quran is the holy book of Islam. Sometimes you'll see it spelled with a K, so don't be surprised if that you do, but usually it's with the QU. And it has a lot of different recordings of what Muhammad said and his teachings and events that happened, instructions of how to live, things like that. Okay. And the main things are, right, be honest, treat each other fairly, respect your parents and your neighbors, has the same rules that we talked about in the other religions, right? Don't lie and steal and murder people, and obey God, right? Or Allah. There is some additional things in here about exactly how to live your life. And these are called the 5 pillars of Islam, things that you need to do. Okay. So one is called the profession of faith. And you will every day, you will say, right, that you believe in the one true God, Allah, and the Prophet Muhammad. Okay. So you're proclaiming your faith publicly, right? And out loud. The second one is you're going to pray 5 times a day facing the Kaaba in Mecca. So if you are in Mecca, you are, facing towards the direction of the Kaaba, which I showed you that picture of the black box, right? If you are like in the United States, far away, you're obviously just going to face the same direction as Mecca. You're not going to be able to tell exactly where the Kaaba is, right? Okay. And so you'll pray 5 times a day. You have your prayer rug that you can see the picture. It's called prostrating on the rug. And you will put your head down, and there's a certain movements that they do for different things. I'm not going to go into that right now, but, and you're encouraged to go to the mosque. That's like a church for Islam. But you do not need to. Okay. And if you go, if you're home, like you'd put down your own prayer rug and then you would pray, 5 times a day. So they'd spread out equally, throughout the day. And, and if you're in a Islamic country or near a mosque, you will hear a call to prayer. The person in the old days, it used to be a person who would get up on the tower and call out, and I'll play it for you. I think it's in the video, what the person sounds like. But that's called a muezzin, that person who is calling people to prayer and reminding them it's time. And nowadays with technology, right, it can be played, a recording, but it is very noticeable if you are in a country that has a lot of mosques. You might hear it and you might wonder what that is, and that's what it is. Okay, another thing is the third pillar, charity. You are required to give back to the community. So if you can, you're supposed to try to give at least 2.5% of your wealth every year. If you are too poor to do that, then they say you should still try to give, but you could give of your time, right? And the next one is fasting during the holy month of Ramadan, which is changes based on the Islamic calendar. So it's the 9th month. You will not eat or drink all day from the time the sun comes up to the time the sun goes down. Okay, so there are exceptions if you are sick or pregnant or too elderly, or there's some certain restrictions that you're allowed to eat or drink, but otherwise you make it all day. And that idea is it's supposed to be uncomfortable, right? And it's supposed to remind you. This month is about reminding you about your faith and focusing on trying to be like the best person you can. And so you're abstaining from some of like your worst habits, and you're trying to focus on your religion and being a good person. And so that hunger is basically supposed to remind you, and it's also supposed to remind you, that it's others have suffered before you, and you can, a little suffering is, shows you like how good you do have it, right? Okay, so what happens though is you can break your fast during the other times. So you can either get up really early and eat before it's dark, right while it's still dark, and then also you can eat when you get home, when it's as soon as it's sundown. And then they have a big fast, a big meal to like kind of make up for it, right? Okay, and the other thing is the last one. You're supposed to try to go to the holy city of Mecca at least once in your lifetime if you can. It's called a pilgrimage, right? A royal journey. And of course, that's if you can, if you're healthy enough or if you have enough money to do it, but you're supposed to really try and go visit the holy places in Mecca, okay? All right. And then there are certain, like I said, there's some rules about how to live. Together, all of the teachings that are in the Quran and the teachings that Muhammad left behind that people recorded for him, and from another source called the Sunnah, which is also based on like what people observed of how Muhammad acted and things. All this is basically what they call a religious law or Sharia. And Sharia is how you're supposed to act, right? So it's about your religion. It's about, marriage and what you're supposed to do with your money and things like that. And there are some basically punishments listed. Now, some Islamic countries who, the religious and the government are all in one. Some places want to do this stronger than others, especially if you're talking like the Taliban or ISIS or, some of these really militant groups. They're extremists, right? Extremists take a very extremely literal view of what's written. And so there were some punishments like chopping off your hand for stealing that are extremely old-fashioned, and most view, there's also within there a lot of like exceptions, things you have to do. I think it was like 60 things that have to be true, like to get it so that you wouldn't have that extreme punishment. So there's always, in most places, you wouldn't get the extreme punishment. You would get the, it's just a reminder to not do these things, and they're much more mild things could happen. But there are, this gets like a lot of attention because, some of the more, militant groups, jihadists and things, they want, stoning and oppression of women and things to be how it is in that particular state. And they want no separation of church and state, right? And so I just wanted you to know, most of the time when most Muslims, the people who follow Islam, they think of this and normally as things like you can't eat pork, or you can't drink alcohol, or you can't gamble, right? Like how you're supposed to act. And so I gave you a little chart on the right there that in case you hear about this, like it's dramatic and they're only talking about chopping off hands and, right? Look at this percentage. 70% of it is about like your worshiping rituals, right? Nothing about that. And that only that little 5% of all of the religious law is about actual punishment, right? So anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that sometimes you hear about it, but it is the minority who believe in that strict of a interpretation. Okay?